Have you ever wondered if the person who insists they do not need anyone is actually the one thinking about you the most once the lights go out? What if the person who created the greatest distance is also the one spending sleepless nights replaying conversations, memories, and moments they shared with you? If you've been trying to understand someone with an avoidant attachment style, stay with me until the end because this perspective may completely reshape the way you interpret their actions. And if you've ever cared deeply for someone who seemed to run every time the relationship became meaningful, what you're about to hear will likely connect pieces that never seemed to fit before. It reveals a side of avoidant behavior that is rarely discussed and often misunderstood. Before we dive deeper, type the word night in the comments below. And if you haven't joined the channel yet, take a second to subscribe. Every new subscriber helps Avoidant Mastery continue creating content that brings clarity to confusing relationship dynamics, and your support truly means more than you realize. Now, let's explore what really happens when an avoidant person begins to miss someone they genuinely care about. I'm not talking about the version they show the outside world or the explanations they give other people. I'm talking about the private emotional reality they often hide even from themselves. These are the quiet moments that happen late at night when every distraction fades away, and they are left with nothing except their own thoughts and emotions. One of the biggest misunderstandings about avoidant people is the belief that they simply do not feel deeply. In reality, many of them experience emotions with incredible intensity. The difference is not the amount they feel, but what they have taught themselves to do with those feelings. Over many years, sometimes beginning in early childhood, they develop an internal belief that emotional dependence is dangerous. They convince themselves that needing another person creates risk, that missing someone makes them vulnerable, and that opening their heart eventually leads to pain. After repeating this belief for so long, it stops feeling like a coping strategy and starts feeling like an unquestionable truth. So when they genuinely long for someone, their first instinct is rarely to reach out. Instead, they retreat even further into themselves, and that hidden response is what we are going to uncover. To really understand this behavior, we have to look at where it begins. The avoidant person in your life, whether they are an ex, a current partner, or someone who constantly alternates between closeness and distance, did not become this way because they lacked the ability to love. They adapted to experiences that taught them love could not always be trusted. Perhaps affection came inconsistently, leaving them unsure whether comfort would be available from one day to the next. Maybe every attempt to express sadness or ask for reassurance was ignored, criticized, or brushed aside. Over time, their nervous system absorbed one powerful lesson. Depending on others often leads to disappointment, so it created a survival strategy designed to reduce that pain before it could happen again. As those early experiences repeated themselves, they slowly built an identity around complete independence. They learned to believe that the safest version of themselves was the one who never asked for help, never relied too much on anyone, and always appeared strong. Eventually, they became so skilled at emotional self-protection that they started believing they truly needed no one. But the moment someone begins to matter, something old awakens inside them. Deep beneath the surface, their nervous system sounds an alarm that warns them they are becoming emotionally exposed. Instead of recognizing that closeness can be healthy, their mind interprets intimacy as a threat. Without fully understanding why, they begin creating distance. They become colder, less available, easily irritated, unusually busy, or convinced the relationship is progressing too quickly, all in an effort to restore the emotional safety they believe they are losing. From your perspective, it can feel confusing and deeply personal. You start questioning yourself, wondering if you said the wrong thing, moved too fast, or somehow caused the change. But most of the time, that emotional wall was standing long before you entered their life. You simply happened to reach the point where real closeness activated old fears that had never been healed. What makes this even more fascinating is what happens after they pull away, after you stop chasing, or after another day passes with them pretending none of it matters. Eventually the evening arrives, their work is finished, the endless distractions disappear. The phone becomes quiet, the television turns off, and they are finally alone with their own thoughts. That is usually when everything they worked so hard to avoid begins quietly rising to the surface. The first feeling that appears is rarely recognized as missing you. Instead, it shows up in a much less obvious way. They feel unsettled without understanding why. Restlessness begins creeping in. They move from one activity to another, searching for something to occupy their mind, yet nothing seems satisfying. There is an uncomfortable tension they cannot easily explain, because acknowledging its true source would mean admitting they are emotionally affected. Their instinct is to dismiss the feeling or distract themselves from it, but the silence keeps making it louder. Beneath that growing restlessness is the reality they have spent years trying not to face. They are thinking about you far more than they want to admit, and the absence they worked so hard to create is beginning to echo back at them in ways they never expected. They find themselves wandering through the house without any real purpose, moving from one room to another, as if they are searching for something they cannot identify. They unlock their phone, stare at the screen for a moment, then lock it again. They open the refrigerator, look inside without interest, and close it just as quickly. An uneasy feeling lingers beneath everything they do, but it has no name they are willing to give it. Giving that feeling a name would mean acknowledging what it truly represents, and they are not ready for that. Instead, they throw themselves into distractions. They endlessly scroll through social media, binge videos, or fill every quiet moment with background noise, hoping to silence what is happening inside. Sometimes these distractions work briefly, but eventually something cuts through the emotional barrier they have worked so hard to maintain. It might be a familiar song that instantly brings back your memory. It could be a joke, a video, or a random post that makes them instinctively think they would love this. For one brief moment, before their emotional defenses return, they experience a genuine pull toward you. That feeling is powerful, but it is also frightening. For someone with an avoidant attachment style, longing is never just about missing another person. It represents emotional exposure. And emotional exposure has always been associated with future pain. Rather than allowing themselves to sit with those emotions, they quickly replace them with something that feels safer. They might message a casual friend, reply to someone who has been trying to start a conversation, or browse dating apps without any real intention of forming a connection. These actions are rarely about replacing you. They are attempts to regain a sense of control over feelings that seem overwhelming. From the outside, those behaviors may appear like they have moved on, but that interpretation often misses what is really happening beneath the surface. They are not necessarily searching for someone new. More often, they are trying to manage uncomfortable emotions in the only way they have ever learned. Staying busy, creating emotional distance, and keeping their attention scattered allows them to avoid confronting what is happening inside. Yet despite all these efforts, one quiet part of their mind keeps returning to you. It is not the loud, logical voice they present to the world. It is the softer voice they usually ignore. During the stillness of the night, when there are fewer distractions left to hide behind, that quiet part begins replaying memories they cannot seem to let go of. Instead of imagining a future together, they often revisit moments that have already happened. Thinking about the future requires hope, and hope feels dangerous because it invites disappointment. The past, however, feels emotionally safer. Those memories cannot reject them again because they have already taken place. So their mind quietly returns to small moments that unexpectedly slipped through their emotional defenses. They remember the sound of your laughter during an ordinary conversation. They think about sitting beside you in comfortable silence without feeling pressured to perform or protect themselves. They revisit meaningful conversations that became deeper than they ever intended. They remember the rare occasions when your eyes made them feel genuinely understood, perhaps more understood than they had ever experienced before. Those seemingly ordinary memories stay with them far longer than most people realize, quietly resurfacing whenever the world around them finally becomes still. Another behavior often goes unnoticed because it happens in complete silence. They may keep checking your online presence without ever contacting you directly. They look at your social media profiles, watch your stories, or quietly search for signs that you are doing okay. They rarely interact because interaction feels emotionally risky, but observing from a distance feels much safer. Even if they were the one who stepped away, some part of them still wants reassurance that you exist within reach. At the heart of avoidant behavior is a difficult contradiction. They often crave closeness while fearing everything required to achieve it. They want to feel connected without exposing themselves emotionally. They want the comfort of your presence without risking rejection, disappointment, or vulnerability. So they remain nearby without fully stepping forward, convincing themselves that their curiosity means nothing more than simple habit. Eventually, the phone is put away, the room grows quiet, and there is nothing left to distract them. This is when the emotions they spent the entire day avoiding begin rising to the surface. They lie awake feeling a confusing mixture of longing, sadness, fear, regret, and even anger. That anger is frequently misunderstood because it is not always directed toward you. More often, it is turned inward. Deep down, many avoidant people recognize that they walked away from something meaningful. They understand, even if they never admit it aloud, that the distance they created was driven by self-protection rather than genuine certainty. In those quiet nighttime hours, there is often a part of them that feels frustrated with itself, a part that wishes closeness did not feel so threatening and wonders what life might have been like if they had been able to let someone truly love them. Even when they become painfully aware of this pattern, recognizing it does not suddenly make it disappear. Self-awareness alone cannot erase years of emotional conditioning, so they remain awake, caught in a confusing mix of sadness, longing, fear, regret, and inner conflict. Reaching out feels too risky because, in their mind, making the first move means giving up the emotional protection they have relied on for years. They have never learned how to experience closeness without holding part of themselves back, so instead of risking genuine connection, they endure the discomfort alone. In many ways, this is the very essence of avoidant behavior. They repeatedly choose familiar emotional pain over uncertain vulnerability. It is a cycle they have lived inside for years, long before they ever met you, and one that continues until they consciously decide to break it. If you're listening to this, chances are there is someone in your life who fits this pattern. Maybe you've spent countless hours wondering what you should have said differently, how you could have made them feel safer, or what you could do to finally help them open their heart. Those thoughts are completely understandable because when we genuinely love someone, we naturally want to become the person who finally reaches them. We hope our patience, kindness, and consistency will be enough to overcome every fear they carry. We want to believe our relationship can be the exception to all the rules. But there is an important truth that deserves to be said, even if it is difficult to hear. Real love cannot heal another person's avoidance unless they are willing to participate in that healing themselves. No amount of patience, reassurance, or emotional availability can do someone else's inner work for them. Avoidant attachment is not a challenge you overcome by proving your love more convincingly. It is a deeply rooted survival pattern that lives inside their nervous system, formed through experiences that taught them emotional closeness was unsafe. Lasting change only begins when they become willing to face those fears, question old beliefs, and actively work toward healthier ways of connecting. That responsibility belongs to them alone. What you can do is understand the pattern well enough that you stop blaming yourself for it. Understanding does not excuse harmful behavior, but it does allow you to see it more clearly without constantly wondering whether you somehow caused it. This is perhaps the most important message of everything we've discussed. Their tendency to pull away is not a measure of your value. It reflects unresolved wounds they have carried for years. When they suddenly become distant, it does not automatically mean you are lacking. When they appear emotionally unavailable, it does not erase the genuine connection you shared. Even when they spend nights missing you but never send a message, that silence is not always evidence that they stopped caring. More often, it reflects someone trapped inside an emotional pattern that once protected them but now keeps them isolated. They built those emotional walls to survive earlier experiences, and over time, those same walls became a prison. They mistake for security, even as they quietly long for the closeness they have convinced themselves is dangerous. The heartbreaking irony is that many of the people who crave connection most deeply are also the ones who struggle the hardest to ask for it. Avoidant individuals are not born emotionally cold. Many learn to appear that way because emotional distance once helped them cope with painful experiences. Even after the original danger has disappeared, that survival strategy continues operating automatically. So the cycle repeats itself. They lie awake thinking about you, revisit meaningful memories, quietly check your online presence, suppress every impulse to reconnect, criticize themselves for feeling vulnerable, and then wake up the next morning wearing the same emotional armor they have worn for years. To everyone around them, they seem perfectly fine, while inside the same exhausting battle continues over and over again without anyone ever seeing it. Now let's shift from understanding their behavior to understanding what you can actually do if you're currently involved with someone who has these patterns. One of the most important things to remember is that applying pressure rarely creates the closeness you hope for. In fact, it often produces the opposite result. The more intensely they feel pursued, the stronger their instinct becomes to create distance. This reaction does not necessarily mean your love is unwanted. Instead, their nervous system mistakenly interprets increased emotional closeness as something threatening, even when your intentions are caring, patient, and sincere. You can be offering exactly what they need, yet their internal alarm still encourages retreat because it cannot easily distinguish healthy intimacy from past emotional danger. That does not mean you should start playing emotional games or intentionally become distant in hopes of making them chase you. Manipulation only creates more insecurity for both people. Instead, the healthiest path is to build a life that remains full and meaningful regardless of where the relationship stands on any particular day. Continue investing in your friendships, your passions, your goals, your personal growth, and the parts of your identity that exist completely outside the relationship. This is not about trying to make them miss you more. It is about protecting your own emotional well-being. When your entire sense of happiness depends on whether they are warm or distant, you slowly begin abandoning yourself while trying to manage someone else's emotional struggles. That isn't a healthy expression of love. Healthy love allows room for connection without requiring you to lose yourself in the process. That is exactly how people begin losing themselves. The next point is incredibly important if you're trying to build a healthy connection with someone who has avoidant tendencies. They are usually far more influenced by steady consistency than dramatic emotional displays. Grand romantic gestures or emotionally charged conversations often fail to create the security you hope for because, throughout their lives, intense emotional moments have frequently been followed by disappointment, rejection, or loss. As a result, they become cautious whenever emotions suddenly become overwhelming. What gradually earns their trust is something much quieter. It is showing up consistently, keeping your word, communicating honestly, and behaving in ways that are dependable over time. Emotional reliability feels much safer to them than emotional intensity ever could, even if they never openly acknowledge how much it affects them. An avoidant person often pays close attention to whether someone remains emotionally stable, even during difficult moments. They notice when your words match your actions, when your behavior stays predictable, and when your affection is not constantly changing based on how they respond. That kind of calm consistency creates an environment where their nervous system slowly begins to relax. They may never express gratitude for it, and at times it may seem like your efforts are going unnoticed. But that does not necessarily mean they are having no impact. Trust often develops beneath the surface long before it becomes visible in their behavior. The foundation is being built quietly inside them, even if they are not yet ready to lower the walls they have spent years maintaining. Progress with an avoidant person is often much slower than most people expect, but consistency speaks to them in ways dramatic moments rarely can. Another important piece of this puzzle involves the way emotions are communicated. People with avoidant attachment frequently become overwhelmed when emotions are expressed with high intensity because their nervous system struggles to process that level of emotional input. Conversations filled with raised voices, repeated accusations, Overwhelming sadness or escalating conflict often cause them to withdraw further instead of becoming more open. This does not mean you should ignore your own feelings or pretend everything is fine. Your emotions deserve to be heard. What matters is learning to communicate those emotions in a way that invites understanding instead of triggering self-protection. Calm honesty is usually far more effective than emotional overload because it allows both people to remain emotionally present rather than immediately slipping into survival mode. For example, you can honestly tell someone, "I've been missing you," without placing immediate pressure on them to solve everything in that moment. You can explain, "What happened really hurt me," without turning the conversation into a list of permanent judgments or absolute statements. The message itself remains truthful, but the delivery changes how it is received. When communication feels steady, respectful, and emotionally regulated, an avoidant person has a much greater chance of staying engaged instead of instinctively pulling away. Healthy conversations are not about hiding your feelings. They are about expressing those feelings clearly while creating enough emotional safety for genuine dialogue to happen. Sometimes the way something is said has just as much influence as the words themselves. Now I want to speak to those of you who have already stepped back from an avoidant relationship. Maybe you stopped chasing, respected their distance, or decided to walk away entirely. If you're wondering what they may be experiencing now, there is something worth understanding. Genuine space often changes the emotional dynamic in ways that constant pursuit never could. Not calculated silence meant to manipulate them, but real absence where they truly experience life without your regular presence. Many avoidant individuals do not fully recognize the depth of their feelings while the relationship still feels available to them. Their attention is focused on protecting themselves, and that protective mode often blocks access to emotions they have spent years avoiding. You can appreciate the moment without placing the weight of your emotional happiness on their shoulders. Think of it as opening a door slowly instead of throwing it wide open. Learning to respond this way is not always natural. It requires emotional maturity, self-awareness, and the ability to stay grounded even when your heart wants to rush ahead. One of the greatest challenges is resisting two opposite extremes. On one side is the temptation to punish them for disappearing, bringing up every moment of silence and every unanswered message. On the other side is the urge to celebrate their return so intensely that all healthy boundaries disappear overnight. Neither response creates lasting security. What helps most is remaining calm, honest, and emotionally balanced. Let the relationship rebuild naturally instead of trying to force it back to where it once was. Every healthy connection grows through consistency, not emotional extremes. Giving trust room to develop again does not mean ignoring what happened, but it also does not require making them relive every mistake the moment they return. The goal is to create space where genuine progress can happen without either person feeling overwhelmed. Now I want to step back and look at the bigger picture, because understanding avoidant behavior is only one part of the story. The other part is understanding yourself. Learning why someone behaves the way they do should never cause you to lose sight of your own emotional needs. Compassion is valuable, but it should never replace honesty with yourself. Ask the difficult question that many people avoid because they are afraid of the answer. Is this relationship giving you enough to make the emotional investment worthwhile? No relationship is perfect, and every partnership requires patience. But are you receiving enough affection, emotional availability, consistency, and mutual effort to build a healthy future? Or have you become so focused on understanding their struggles that you have stopped noticing your own unmet needs? Understanding another person's attachment wounds does not require you to stay in a relationship that continually leaves you emotionally exhausted. You can deeply empathize with someone's past while also recognizing that their current behavior is hurting you. Those truths can exist together without contradicting one another. Loving someone does not mean sacrificing your own emotional well-being indefinitely. Sometimes the healthiest decision is to accept that compassion alone cannot create the kind of relationship you need. Choosing yourself is not selfish, and walking away does not erase the love you felt. It simply acknowledges that lasting relationships require more than genuine feelings. They also require emotional availability, mutual effort, and a willingness from both people to grow. Wisdom often means recognizing the difference between understanding someone's pain and accepting a situation that no longer supports your own. In some cases, one of the kindest things you can do is speak with quiet honesty. You can let them know that you understand where their behavior comes from, while also expressing what you genuinely need in order to feel secure and fulfilled. This is not about making demands or issuing ultimatums. It is about communicating your reality with respect for both yourself and them. Many avoidant people are used to one of two reactions. Either others silently tolerate the emotional distance, or they eventually explode in frustration. They are far less accustomed to someone calmly saying, "I care about you, I understand your struggles, and I also need a relationship that meets my emotional needs." That combination of compassion and clear boundaries is powerful because it demonstrates both love and self-respect at the same time. For someone with avoidant patterns, encountering that kind of steady confidence can be surprisingly impactful. It challenges the expectations they have carried for years. Instead of experiencing criticism or emotional chaos, they meet someone who is calm, direct, and secure enough to remain grounded without abandoning themselves. While there is never a guarantee that this alone will transform the relationship, it creates one of the healthiest opportunities for genuine change. If growth is going to happen, it is much more likely to begin in an environment where honesty, respect, and emotional stability exist together, rather than in one driven by fear, guilt, or pressure. Healthy boundaries often communicate safety more effectively than emotional intensity ever could. As we come back to where we started, remember the image of the avoidant person lying awake at night. They replay conversations, revisit quiet memories, glance at your profile, feel the urge to reach out, suppress it, and wrestle with emotions they rarely allow anyone else to see. Their inner world is often far more emotional than their outward behavior suggests. They frequently miss more than they admit, care more than they express, and desire closeness, while simultaneously fearing everything that closeness requires. Recognizing this can bring clarity because it confirms that what you shared was not simply imagined. The connection may have been genuine, and their feelings may have been real. But genuine feelings alone are not enough to build a healthy, lasting relationship. Lasting love also requires emotional readiness, consistent effort, and the willingness of both people to meet each other openly. What you choose to do with that understanding is entirely your decision. But once you truly see the difference, you are no longer looking at the relationship through the same lens. If this conversation helped you see avoidant attachment in a new way, share it with someone who may need to hear it as well. And don't forget to leave the word night in the comments. Every conversation we have here helps build a community where people can better understand themselves and the relationships that matter most. If you haven't subscribed to Avoidant Mastery yet, we'd love to have you join us as we continue growing together, one video and one meaningful discussion at a time. Thank you for spending your time here, and thank you for listening until the very end.